Since the GEWA G9 kit's released, I've been wondering what would be next for GEWA in the electronic drum space. There were a couple of ways that it could have gone, but the most logical after releasing a flagship kit and module would have been to bring out a lower spec module based on that technology. And that's exactly what they've done. They've just revealed a brand new drum module, the GEWA G5 digital drum module, and a new kit configuration to go along with it, the Pro BS5. Maybe that combination of letters could have been bounced around the office a couple more times before they committed to it. So this does fit with the tried and tested formula, but there are a few nice surprises in the details. I'm Luke, this is the eDrum Workshop, and today I'm going to break down what's been revealed so far about the new GEWA G5, and discuss my thoughts on the module, the kit, and the general direction that GEWA are taking. So let's start at the module. The most striking difference compared to the G9 workstation is that this is not a touchscreen module. I did have a feeling that if they were going to bring out a module at a lower price point, that it was either going to have a much smaller touchscreen or do away with it completely, so this does make sense to me. The branding that they're leading with also lends itself to this design choice. They're quite heavily leaning into this being a performance module made just for playing. It looks like they're hoping that this will be more appealing to people who maybe aren't as interested in tweaking, or those who just want something that's easier to manage live on stage. And it's a good idea in my opinion. Touchscreens are quite difficult to navigate in that kind of environment, and this also ties in quite nicely against their branding of the G9 being the workstation module. Having these kinds of separate uses in mind feels a little bit more purposeful to me than saying, this is the cheap module, this is the expensive module. And it does make me think that down the line, maybe there'll be a very basic home or practice module too. On the G5, the touchscreen has been replaced with a very Roland-esque LCD screen. I was hoping that other manufacturers might stick with at least a decent sized colour screen like the Alesis Strike module these days, but it does look functional enough. Of course, with the removal of a touchscreen comes the need for extra buttons for the functions. Personally, this works fine for me. I'm glad that they've gone with the approach of having enough individual buttons to get to each menu quickly, so hopefully that translates well to ease of use. There are some function buttons up at the top, arrow keys and a selection button to the right of the screen, and some function dials below the screen. I don't actually think that I saw those arrows and the middle button being used in the demonstration, but the other buttons and the dials look to be context sensitive depending on the menu. Under these you've got buttons for everything kit related, instrument and kit selections, effects, mix and master, and to the bottom right there are some plus, minus and preview buttons, and over to the left of the module are the more utility focused buttons for USB load and save, setup, trigger controls and the song playing options. This is all pretty standard and useful looking stuff. On the back of the module came a couple of the nice surprises. They've kept the full 1/4" TRS inputs for all triggers. There's no cable snakes here at all, and that's great to see. And then there's the foot switch input along with 11 trigger inputs and the hi-hat controller input. This is down a little bit from the G9. There are just 3 tom inputs and 2 auxiliary inputs, but this isn't a huge decrease, and that's the kind of thing that you expect on a lower priced module. In terms of outputs, there are master left and right jack outputs and 4 direct outputs. There's also a mix-in port, proper MIDI in and out connections, a USB port for hooking up to the computer, the power adapter, and along the front there's a USB port for memory sticks and the headphone socket. So it looks like there's a decent amount of trigger inputs and audio output options to live up to this idea of being a performance module. You could very comfortably play gigs with this level of routing. Moving on to what we've been shown of the sounds and the presets, this was another nice surprise. It looks very much like the bulk of the sounds, if not all of them from the stock G9, are in the G5 module. In the overview video, it stated that it's the same sound engine and that you get the same sound and playing experience as the G9. And looking at the list of the presets shown, it matches up with the preset list from the stock G9. And in the demonstrations, they sound very much the same too. Basically, the bulk of the differences appear to be in the features and the general in and out capability rather than the instruments. Having really gimped versions of the flagship module sounds in the lower end modules is always quite disappointing, so this is a really nice approach to see. Building your own kit presets was another point that was highlighted in this video. You can save any stock preset as a user one and then edit it, and you can edit any pad zones instruments independently as well. This is something that should be standard fare in electronic drum modules anyway, but it is nice to see confirmation of this kind of flexibility. The one-shot sample import functionality that's available on the G9 is in here as well, and so is the ability to layer two instruments to one zone. But looking at the specs from the website, it might not be possible to add additional instruments from the GEWA Sound Store. I'm not 100% on that, but that's how I read it. They've also brought over the effects processors from the G9 as well. And then you've got functions like the song player via either USB or Bluetooth connectivity, MIDI over Bluetooth, and recording straight to the USB drive. The trigger engine has been lifted directly from the G9, which means that you get the pad setup presets for different GEWA kit configurations, as well as the universal triggering of other manufacturers' pads. Most companies kinda need to do that these days, because if you've got any individual components, odds are they're probably from a manufacturer like Roland or Yamaha. So I'm glad that they've carried this over to the G5. So all in all, on the surface, this looks like a pretty good module for the price point. Obviously, it's impossible to say for sure without trying it myself, and any module will ultimately live or die on its overall playability. But it does look pretty promising if you don't mind a button-heavy, smaller screen approach. So let's move on to the kit, the G5 Pro BS5. The nicest surprise with the kit itself was that this is the same overall configuration as the G9 Pro C5 kit. The pad setup hasn't been stripped back or dumbed down. It's a 5-piece kit with a 14-inch snare, 10, 12 and 14-inch toms, all of which are 5 inches deep, and an 18 by 14 kick drum. It comes with two 14-inch crash cymbal pads, an 18-inch ride cymbal pad, and a 2-piece 14-inch hi-hat pad. Exactly the same pad setup as their G9 C5 and L5 kits. The drums do have a different style of lugs, and the finish is a new black sparkle finish, which looks nice enough. The other obvious difference, for Europe at least, is the lack of a rack. They've gone for an entirely stand-based approach with this kit rather than the DW rack that comes with the European version of the G9. I actually didn't realise until checking up before that they've done away with the rack system on the G9 kits in other territories now, and they're supplied with Gibraltar stands. But the G5 kit comes with GEWA's own hardware, and personally I think it looks great with the stand setup, and actually my overall impressions of the kit are very positive. One of the biggest gripes that a lot of people have with the tier systems of electronic drums is that they tend to limit the larger pad sizes to the most expensive kits. Speaking of prices, I've been told that this kit will be available to pre-order from next week, and it will be available at the price of €3,890, which I believe includes the 19% VAT in Germany. So the base price without tax will be lower, and then you just need to add on your local taxes. They're supposed to start shipping in August, but I don't know exactly when it will be available in all territories. But at this price point, it's comfortably $1,000 or so below the price of the GEWA G9 C5 kit. So while we're not looking at bottom end prices, it's clearly in the sort of mid-range camp, and it comes in below Roland's VAD 506 price point in the same territory. I really do like their approach of going for the same head sizes as their flagship kit, and I do think that it would have been a mistake for them to go any smaller than Roland's VAD sizes for this price point. Personally, I would have liked to have seen 16-inch cymbals instead of 14-inch ones, but that is also the case on the G9 kits. If you do prefer smaller pads, there is a G9 kit with shallow pads, the Studio 5 kit, and it really wouldn't surprise me to see a G5 kit configuration with these sizes down the line. If GEWA can get the playability of this kit right, then I do think it will be a pretty strong offering for this price point. The sounds will always come down to personal taste. I think that some of the GEWA sounds are good and some are definitely not my cup of tea, and the playability is still up in the air for me at the moment. I have read reports in the past of people struggling to get the triggering right on their G9 kit, and that's definitely a huge part of the equation. However, fortunately, rather than just speculating, I might be able to weigh in on that in the near future. So I'm tentatively looking forward to seeing how the G5 shapes up, and I'm really glad that GEWA haven't just released the G9 and then bowed out. More choices and players in the eDrum game are very welcome. But what do you think of the G5 kit and the new module? Does it excite you or are you indifferent? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed my take on things, please pop a like on the video, subscribe for more electronic drum news and other electronic drum content, and why not check out my store over at thedrumworkshop.com if you want new kits or samples for your electronic drum module. Above all, enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you in the next video. Cheers!